Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll give you all a moment to hop on here, and I will make sure that everybody can access the chat box. So that should be open if you want to say a quick hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. And we'll give people a minute to jump on. All right, and thanks, Bev, for kicking us off from Hawaii. Nice to have you. See Alaska, Kentucky, Colorado. Awesome. It's always great to see where people are coming from. It makes me feel like a part of something bigger than myself, which is a nice feeling to have. All right, so we'll give it a few more minutes. And again, if you're just jumping on, feel free to say a quick hello in the chat. Thanks so much for being here. This is our Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series. In our session, we're going to be talking about exploring partnerships between Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Parks. So hopefully you all are in the right place and are ready to start talking about parks partnerships. So thank you all so much for joining us. And again, continue to say hello in the chat, and I will go ahead and get us started with some housekeeping items and some welcomes, and we'll dive right into our content for today. So I think a lot of you are already familiar with our work, but in case you're joining us for the first time or a bit unfamiliar about Safe Routes Partnership, we're a national organization, and we work to advance safe walking, rolling, and biking to and from schools and in everyday life, so including parks like we're going to be talking about today, and improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, abilities, and disabilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. So that's a little bit about us and our work. I'm Corey Johnson. I'm our Program and Engagement Manager here at Safe Routes Partnership. Those of you who have seen me on webinars for a while are used to me saying that I am in DC, but I recently moved to Baltimore, Maryland, so I'm back in my home state, a little bit closer to where I grew up. So very excited to be back in Maryland. And I'll still be doing some work in DC too. So those of you who are around the DMV region, you will still see me. But I'm really excited to get to know some people who are in the Baltimore region as well. This is closer to my home community. So excited about that. And then I also have Vanessa Castillo, who's our Program and Policy Manager, who actually is in DC. So I'll have Vanessa, if you want to say a quick hello.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm the Program and Policy Manager and part of our Safe Routes to Parks team here at Safe Routes Partnership.
Yeah, so Vanessa will be on to share a bit about Safe Routes to Parks work that's happening. There's a lot of great things happening in Colorado, so I'm really excited to have her present with me. And like I mentioned, if you're just jumping on, feel free to say hello in the chat box. Let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from, and your connection to Safe Routes or Safe Routes to School or Safe Routes work in general. So feel free to continue doing that, and I will go ahead and get us started for today. So just a few more logistics. We would love for the chat to be interactive, so feel free to say hello, leave your comments. People drop resource links in the chat. All of that is great. If you have any questions for us, please drop them in the Q&A box. That way we can keep track of what the questions are and what the comments are, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And we'll also have all of our recording and slides available after the webinar today. So if you missed something, don't worry about it. We'll make sure that you get all the slides. There are links to all the resources that we're talking about. And we'll also send out a survey after the webinar. So if you missed something, no worries. We'll get you the recording and we'll get you the slides following up later this afternoon. So we kind of did a little getting to know each other in the chat box. So I wanted to dive a bit more into your experiences with parks. And so I'm curious, I'm going to launch a little poll here. Give me a moment. Okay, so I'd love to know from you all, how often do you visit your local parks? Since we're talking about parks and park access today, I'd love to know a bit about how parks are a part of your life or not a part of your life. So I'll give this a moment. It can be a local park in your community, for some of you that might even be a national park. Just curious. Right, so take about 10 seconds to wrap up if you haven't given your response, and I'll go ahead and share out. All righty. So it looks like we have a pretty nice range here. A lot of people are going to parks a few times a week. Some are a little more than that, some are a little less than that. Some people don't go at all, totally fine. I guess just depends on, your lifestyle, preference, access to parks. This is just a little glimpse of how we're visiting parks and using parks in this group today. So I'll stop sharing this, and then I have a quick chat question for you just to kind of follow up on this question. So I'm curious, what is your favorite activity to do in the park? So originally I was actually going to make this a poll question, and I realized there are endless possibilities for park activities. So let me just ask people, for those of you who do visit parks, whether it's once a month or a few times a week, what are your favorite activities or things to do in the park? I'm somebody who I like to sit and read in a park, listen to music. So that's my favorite park activity, and I'm curious what yours are. All right, so I see a few bird watching. Interesting. That was not on my list of options for the poll, so I'm glad that I did a chat instead. Picnic, awesome. Playing with the dogs, great. Walking, I like to do a lot of walking in parks too. Ooh, lounging on a hammock, that's nice. I wish I had a hammock in my park. I don't, but something to include in a parks checklist. But as a gatherings, kids activities, awesome. Lots of picnics, running, biking. Great. So feel free to keep these going. See a few pickleball, definitely having a moment. So I see some pickleball activities in here. Creaking, nice. All right, great. So it seems like we have a very active parks community and a nice range of activities that people are involved in, which is great. So we're going to be talking all about parks today and park access and how we love parks and celebrate parks. So feel free to continue to add in your park activities and ideas to the chat. I'm sure you're inspiring some people to get involved in some new park activities. So go ahead and do that. And I have one more poll question. So obviously we like to spend a lot of time in parks and do a range of activities, but I'm also curious to know what would make it easier and safer for you to access and enjoy a park in your community. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. Let me see. Do a new poll here. So thinking about the time that you spend in parks, what would make it easier or safer to access a park in your community? So is it better infrastructure? Is it having longer hours of operation, more organized programs and events and activities? Is it improved lighting or signage, transit to get to a park, even just having a park closer to where you live? There's some communities where there just aren't any parks around. So could having a park be something that would improve access, amenities, or if there's something else, feel free to put that in the chat too. So I'll give people about 10 seconds to wrap up this poll. All right, last call for responses. All right, so I will go ahead and end this one now and share these results. So it seems like infrastructure is a big one. So sidewalks, trails, bike lanes, bike paths. We're going to be talking a lot about that today when we're talking about safe routes to parks. Infrastructure is a part of that. Better lighting and signage, we hear that a lot. Just, amenities, water fountains, bike rack shade, the hammocks that people are enjoying sound great. I want a hammock in my park. So yeah. These are, when it comes to, barriers to park access, these are some of the ones that we find in our work, and we're going to be digging into some of these barriers and exploring solutions a bit later as a part of this webinar. So I just wanted to get you all thinking about park access in general. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into parks and talk a bit about, what do parks actually have to do with safe routes to school? Like normally we talk about safe routes to school in these webinars. Now I'm bringing in parks. So what is the point of talking about parks when it comes to safe routes to school? And some of you might already know this connection, but others, this might be, kind of a new idea or concept. So, parks are actually very similar to schools in the sense that they're community destinations. They're visited and used by kids and families and other community members. A lot of parks are often, maybe next to or near a school or along a school route. So when you're thinking about a safe route to school, it might also be a safe route to park. A safe route to a park. There are also places to be physically active, and we hope that schools can be that same space too, and also places to just connect with your community. So a lot of you mentioned in the chat, you like to gather with family, your friends, or your pets, or play a sport. So parks are these kind of, natural gathering spaces for people. And we also know that just like safe routes to school, we talk about, barriers to walking and biking, rolling to school. There are also barriers to accessing parks. Parks aren't always necessarily safe or easy to get to, especially if you're walking, biking, rolling, scooting, or using transit. They're also not always accessible to communities of color or low-income communities, and sometimes lack that adequate funding and resources. So again, very similar to things we talk about in Safe Routes to School when it comes to, safety and access. We talk about the same things in Safe Routes to Parks as well. So thinking about, some of our parks partners, and again, this will probably sound familiar because there's lots of overlap between parks and safe routes to school. But a lot of parks partners are probably people who you all are already connecting with, whether they're nonprofit organizations or community groups, elected officials who might be a part of, parks planning or park events or infrastructure projects or, community policies. Just general community members who might be a part of a safe routes to school program, might be involved in, park access as well. Public health partners, thinking about parks as places to, be physically active and get out and, and walk and roll, even places to do community outreach and community engagement. Your school or school district, there are some school districts where, we'll talk about this a bit later, but the school actually partners with, with a local park to, expand spaces and access for students to use during the school day. Your Parks and Rec department, obviously, and also arts and cultural organizations. So I know that I've been to so many, festivals and community gatherings in parks that might be hosted by, like a local, theater company or arts organization. So those are just a few of the partners that you all might be familiar with in Safe Routes to School that are also connected to Safe Routes to Parks work. We also know there are also a few differences between schools and parks. So I did want to highlight a few of those too. So, when it comes to parks, parks are these recreational spaces, right? So you think about school, you think about, academics and, and spaces to learn and develop, academic skills, social skills, whereas parks are really about, recreation and leisure and enjoying yourself in a way that's different from a school. Parks are also open to, for most of the time, open to all age groups. Doesn't necessarily mean that all age groups are always welcome in a park at the same time. I think about like teenagers congregating in a park and, how that, the perception of teens in a park can be a barrier for them to access parks and enjoy them. So we hope that they're open spaces, but that's not always the case. Parks are also places that might feel more welcoming than a school campus for some people. So I know that I talk to people, who aren't really connected with the school for a number of reasons, whether it's, the school, nobody on the staff speaks the same language as they do, or just not feeling comfortable in a school building, but a park might be a more accessible and open space for somebody who might have trouble engaging with the school. And, parks are also places to, reflect and refuel and refresh and spaces to have fun. So just like in the chat, when you were talking about all your park activities, like a lot of those things sounded fun. And while we hope that schools can be fun, sometimes they're not, especially these days, school can be stressful. So, we hope that parks can kind of be those spaces to, to reflect and de-stress a bit and, kind of take yourself out of work and school mode and just enjoy your time. Somebody also mentioned that parks welcome seniors and older adults, multi-generational spaces. Yes, absolutely. And we'll talk about that a bit later too, thinking about, people to engage in, in park activities. And there are lots of multi-generational opportunities when it comes to safe routes to parks. So thanks for that note, Nick and Laura. So, because we know that there are all these overlaps between Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Parks, we figured that why not collaborate? Why not team up? That collaboration really helps us go further. We have a lot of similar goals when it comes to Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Parks, whether it's increasing physical activity, promoting health and wellness, increasing that community connectedness, and helping people feel safe in their community. Whether it's actually safe traveling to a park or even just safe existing in that space and knowing that, you'll be okay there and that your family and friends you're gathering with will be okay there as well. And also communities really like when we work together. They actually really appreciate that. I know that sometimes, we talk about burnout in our work where you're running around, you're doing so many different programs, you have all these events, it can get to be too much. For community members, it can get to be a lot too. I've heard people say like, I don't want to attend 5 meetings, I want to attend 1. I don't want to go to the same thing over and over and over again. So, kind of teaming up with people who are working in park spaces can also make it easier for community members to engage. If there's an event at a park, they can go to one event as opposed to going to the park and then the school and then the library and then town hall. Like, why not just all put it all together in one space? So it helps you out and it helps community members out as well. So that's a bit about why we wanted to talk about safe routes to parks and about possible collaborations with Safe Routes to School. And we also wanted to connect this to our Colorado Community Engagement Toolkit, which I think that those of you who've been on these webinars have seen this already, but for those of you who are new, a few years ago, I can't believe it's been a few years now, we published a Community Engagement Toolkit to support communities across Colorado, but honestly, other communities can adapt and use this as well. And it outlines our community engagement framework. So all of our Colorado Safe Routes to School webinars will link back to the framework that's outlined in this toolkit. So that's some great best practices, some guiding questions, examples of community engagement in Colorado, and then a bunch of links to resources, worksheets, different tools you can use. And here's the actual community engagement framework. So for those of you who are new to this, we often talk about this in our Colorado webinars. And today we're actually going to focus on 2 parts of the framework. So one is partnering with other organizations to build community relationships, hence the collaboration between Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Parks. And then also planning thoughtful, culturally responsive community engagement experiences, which Vanessa also talked on a bit with some of her examples of Safe Routes to Parks in Colorado. So those are the 2 parts of the framework we're really going to be focusing on today, but honestly, a bunch of these other parts apply as well. And just before I hand things over to Vanessa, another chat question for you all. I'm curious how you all have incorporated parks into your Safe Routes to School program, if you've incorporated parks into your Safe Routes to School program. So I know that some people have done, the park is like their meetup space for their walk and roll to school day celebration, or some people have traffic gardens or bike rodeos in a park. And so I'm just curious, those of you who've worked to incorporate parks into Safe Routes to School, what does that looked like for you? So I see improved walking and biking routes between schools and parks. Thanks, Ashley. Holding bike rodeos at parks, using parks as a starting point for bike rides and walk, bike, and roll to school day. Parks being used as a walking school bus meetup spot. Awesome. Developing trails that link schools. Yeah, those trail connectivity projects can be a big part of parks work. Outreach tabling, having parks be a walking field trip, trying to create better infrastructure to connect parks and schools. Awesome. All right, so if you have any other examples, feel free to put them in the chat. It's interesting, a lot of people have parks as their like meetup spots for activities. So that seems to be a good strategy and something for you all to think about as you consider how to incorporate parks into your Safe Routes to School program. So continue to add comments in the chat. I'm going to hand things over to Vanessa. And like I mentioned, if you have questions, drop questions in the Q&A box. Any comments or resources, drop them in the chat box. And Vanessa, I will hand things over to you.
Thanks, Corey. So these next few slides that I have are actually just our working definition of Safe Routes to Parks, which Corey has already queued up so beautifully with planting those seeds of those poll questions. But this might be helpful for you as you are talking to community members or partners around like, what is Safe Routes to Parks? So how we define Safe Routes to Parks is a movement to make access to great parks make access to great parks by walking, biking, and taking public transit safer, more convenient, and more equitable for people, especially in low-income communities and communities of color where less investment has gone in routes to and facilities in parks. And as Safe Routes Partnership, we've been supporting this local level work to increase park access for the last 7 years through our Activating Communities program. And this past year, we were excited to have the state of Colorado be one of 3 states participating in our first ever Safe Routes to Parks Accelerator program. So Colorado Department of Transportation, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment have been working together to connect people to these important community assets. And we'll share some of the work going on in Colorado in some of the next few slides, but we're really excited to be continuing to support Safe Routes to Parks in Colorado in this coming year with the launch of our 2024 Colorado Activating Communities program. So stay tuned. We'll share more information towards the end about this opportunity. You can go to the next slide, Corey. All right, you can, here's our Safe Routes to Parks video here.
Parks offer people countless physical, social, and mental health benefits, which is why Safe Routes Partnership is helping to make parks accessible to everyone. That means people of all ages, races, ethnicities, abilities and disabilities, and travel modes. Not every community has a park close by. For communities that do have parks nearby, that doesn't mean the parks are accessible. What makes a safe route to a park? Safe routes have sidewalks, crosswalks, and working streetlights. Passing cars travel at reasonable speeds. They're safe for kids, older adults, and people with disabilities. Safe routes are free from crime, violence, and over-policing. People feel comfortable walking, biking, or taking transit there. Safe routes are close and convenient. They connect people to parks from home, work, or school because research shows that people who live within a 10-minute walk of a park visit twice as often as those who live more than 10 minutes away. Safe routes to parks are equitable. That means investing in the communities that need it most because of historical and ongoing lack of investment. Everyone has a role to play to create safe, convenient, and equitable access to parks. Safe Routes Partnership is here to help. To learn what you can do, visit saferoutespartnership.org.
Thanks, Corey, for queuing that up. We put the link in the chat to the video. We've often shared this with community members who are looking to work on Safe Routes to Parks. It's a really nice, like, succinct definition of what it means to do Safe Routes to Parks work. But our definition really closely aligns with the Trust for Public Lands 10-minute walk campaign, which aims to have all people living within a 10-minute walk of a high-quality park. And we do this work because we know that transportation and perceptions of safety are a limiting factor to park usage. And through greater park usage, we see how it improves community health, community connectedness, and so much more. Next slide. There we go. So I think we all intuitively understand the importance of parks and how they boost physical activity, but it's also backed by research. Last summer, the Community Preventative Services Task Force, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and supported by the Centers for Disease Control, this task force, essentially what they do is provide guidance on ways to promote health, prevent chronic disease, based on the available scientific evidence. So what they did was they looked at parks and what conditions help boost physical activity. And what they found was that there wasn't sufficient evidence to show that parks, greenways, and trails alone increase physical activity. But what they did find was a measurable increase in physical activity when parks, greenways, and trails were coupled with at least one other intervention. And these interventions were community engagement, structured programming, public awareness, and access enhancements. And this was published in what's called the Community Guide. Their findings also pointed to the economic benefits of these interventions. So what they found was for every dollar spent on these interventions led to over $3 worth of benefits, including improved health due to physical activity. So just like Safe Routes to School has a great evidence base for those strategies and interventions, so does Safe Routes to Parks in increasing park access. Next slide. So I mentioned those interventions. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what those are. But essentially, what's highlighted in the community guide are the core strategies within our Safe Routes to Parks framework. And with these 4 strategies in hand, we know that people use parks when they have a voice in shaping park design and improvements both in and the routes leading to parks. When community members are engaged in planning processes, it increases their sense of ownership of those spaces, directly impacting their use. So I saw in the chat people talking about youth, right? And that's a great example of engaging youth in the use and the improvements that could happen in parks to better serve more community members. We also know that people use parks when they can participate in programs like walking groups, exercise classes, sports, and other social opportunities. These kinds of programs help to activate parks and encourage people to connect with each other and be active. We also know people use parks when they're informed about what parks have to offer them, right? This might look like wayfinding signage or other ways to communicate and promote park amenities. And lastly, we know that people use parks when they can safely and comfortably walk, bike, or roll to them and can easily access park spaces at times and locations that are convenient for them. So these are strategies that we know work because it's backed by evidence. And Safe Routes to School is also a great established program throughout the US, but also in Colorado that can actually help to contribute to all 4 of these supportive practices. And we want to share a few examples from Colorado communities of how bringing parks and schools together under that umbrella of Safe Routes to Parks, of Safe Routes, can maximize our work to make biking and walking safe and convenient for everybody. Next slide. So I want to start off our first example from the town of La Junta, where 2 high school students, Alyssa Bullock and Shelly Schmidt, sought to start a new bike share program in their community with the goal to provide everyone an alternative and affordable mode of transportation that was clean, healthy, and enjoyable. So they actually applied for a grant from Colorado Department of Transportation and were awarded $66,000 to deploy 26 bikes and 30 racks to create essentially bike share stations throughout their community that connected to parks, courthouses, Chamber of Commerce, the local grocery store, local health providers, and the local college there. The 10% match that was required for the grant was provided by the City of La Junta staff and volunteer hours through the installation of the bike racks, the bikes, and the software. And so the City of La Junta administered the grant, but now that program is in full swing and it will be administered by the Colorado Youth Initiative, otherwise known as the co-share. So this is like a great example of a youth-led initiative and partnerships at play to improve access to parks, along with access to a lot of other community destinations, including schools. The second example we have to share comes from Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and was led actually by the school district there. The Roaring Fork School District wanted to connect the Rio Grande Trail to the Iron Bridge community by restoring a historic bridge for pedestrians to safely use. So they applied for this Colorado Department of Transportation's grant, the Revitalizing Main Street program, in 2021, so rather recently, and won $149,000 grant for this particular project. So this previously unusable bridge will soon provide a safe crossing across the Roaring Fork River to connect people on foot to a new school facility and future planned commercial establishments there. So that's a great example of an access enhancement. Next slide. And the third example we have is from the city of Durango. I don't know if there's somebody here from Durango, but you might be familiar with this example if you are. This one I really like. This one. So basically this work started with the city of Durango, who had been working to update their multimodal transportation plan, really with the vision to make Durango accessible for people of all modes and abilities. And it includes a really useful and specific measurement that a middle school age child should be able to safely get around Durango independently. And so the city had been working on these big goals of completing capital improvement projects, adopting a complete streets policy, providing a robust transit service. And in light of all these investments, members in the community were requesting bike racks at everyday destinations like parks, local businesses, and they wanted a place to safely park their bikes, especially if they didn't live nearby. And really increasing bike parking was also an opportunity to serve people who wanted to visit parks recreationally and those who may depend on bikes as their only mode of transportation, such as kids or people without car access. So to begin to meet this need, the local Rotary Club created a program where they provided site inspections and bike rack installations for local businesses and nonprofits upon request and free of charge. And the popularity of this program encouraged the city to apply for the Colorado Department of Health's Quick Win funding to install bike racks at least 8 park locations plus schools. But it was a great example, and local businesses, but this is just a great example of the collaboration that could happen to achieve some impactful short-term actions that are also responsive to community members when they provided input about what they would need to access these spaces. So we want to take the next few slides. I know Corey planted some seeds and shared some ideas, and just highlight ways that you can get started in integrating safe routes to parks in your programs. And what you might already find is that you're already doing some of this work, or you didn't realize it, and or you may discover a new idea or opportunity you hadn't thought of before. So go ahead, Corey. All right. Number one, simple way to start is to think about your current safe routes to school activities and see where there might be opportunities to weave in parks and what you're already doing, right? So maybe you are already hosting walk and bike to school days. Coordinating with your local parks to host that is a great way to expand your partnership and to start forming that partnership with parks and recreation staff. Asking if parks could also be a site for remote drop-off or pickup programs for like the park and walk activities. Inviting staff and park users to be part of your walk and roll audits. We've seen some great examples. Folks mentioned here seniors as an engaged audience at parks. We've seen some great examples of multi-generational walk audits with youth and older adults to assess routes to and from parks. Hosting bike rodeos or bike repairs in your local parks is also a great way to engage with families and neighbors in the area. So community engagement is a supportive practice of both safe routes to school and safe routes to parks. And if you recall, it's one of those evidence-based interventions outlined in the community guide to boost park use. So partnering with parks on engagement efforts is a great way to support common goals, combine resources, diversify your engagement efforts, and elevate community need and interest for safe routes. This can look a number of different ways. The example we have here is from my hometown, Tucson, Arizona, where the city partnered with Living Streets Alliance, a local nonprofit organization, to coordinate a movie night with ice cream, free bike repair, and opportunities to share input on a proposed bike Boulevard project that connects to several schools, a library, and parks. And the organization had also been coordinating the Safe Routes to School program and other safer street initiatives in the city to really have community members envisioning what safe access could look like. And so this partnership allowed the city to take a much more fun and creative and an informal approach to engaging community members, and also allowed for the sharing of resources, which can be really important if you have working with different departments within your municipality or community. Bridging parks and transportation to combine efforts can be really important. And we've seen similar groups do things like hosting joint listening sessions with kids and families, or partnering with parks programs to engage community members and youth on safe routes related projects. So whether that's after school programming in parks or a local recreation center that hosts students, this is a great opportunity to engage around safe routes related projects. And Corey mentioned this third one, mentioned it previously, but I want to reiterate that opening school grounds for community use is also very much aligned with the interventions outlined in the community guide. So broadly, this is like an access enhancement. And sometimes we think of that as sidewalks, safe crossings. We saw that great example in Glenwood, Colorado with the restoration of that bridge. But also access enhancements could simply be making sure that parks are available and convenient for people to use. And shared use agreements are an example of what this could look like. In a lot of places, school playgrounds often double as a local park, and in opening up these spaces to community can increase the amount of park space that otherwise might not be available. So this is also an opportunity for schools and park systems to share resources to ensure that spaces are great for everyone to use. In Tutalin, Oregon, actually, the Parks and Recreation Department has a shared use agreement with the school district to share investment in and use of 2 school facilities. And these facilities have a sports field, a cross-country running trail, and this ensures that the public and students can access high-quality outdoor assets. So if you want to know more about these kinds of agreements and how to make them work, because sometimes there's questions about liability and maintenance, we actually have a lot of good resources that we can connect you with. All right, the fourth way you can integrate your safe routes to school and safe routes to parks, weave those 2 destinations together, is to highlight the physical connection between those destinations. And this could be partnering on events and activities to connect kids to their local parks from school. I saw some folks in the chat share that they do walking field trips to their parks. That's a great way to highlight those, bridge the school and the park together. You know, a science class field trip or even an art project to draw attention to a safe route between those 2 locations are some great encouragement activities. The map that you see here is actually from the city of Colorado Springs, which if you're from Colorado, you know there's a destination for outdoor recreation nestled in the shadow of Pikes Peak. But the southeast neighborhood of the city has a long history of underinvestment and has consistently sort of demonstrated poorer health than the rest of the city. And this map features the Sand Creek Trail that runs through this community. But many people in this part of town didn't realize that the connectivity provided this trail provided connectivity to local schools, local parks, a sports facility, a local YMCA. And so a local group there, RISE, in the Southeast, as a resident-led coalition, identified this as a barrier to widespread use of this trail, and feedback during community engagement activities really indicated that the lack of appropriate signage and wayfinding features made it really difficult for local residents to understand and use the trail. So in the spring of last year, the Trail and Open Spaces Coalition used Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment quick win funding to design, purchase, and install artistic signage along this corridor and other important locations throughout the neighborhood to show people that this connectivity exists and encourage people to use it. And so this creative placemaking project will complement an already approved standard signage and wayfinding project being planned for the roadway connections there. But this is a great example of highlighting those connections in the community. And last, if you are like, these sound great, I want to do them, and I would love more hands-on assistance, and I live in Colorado, we have a great opportunity for you to implement these strategies. So this October, we will be accepting applications for our 2024 Activating Communities program. This is a 9-month technical assistance program that we're offering to 4 community-based organizations in Colorado, and it comes with a $10,000 grant. We will be hosting an info session on November 1st. So I invite you to read more about the program and eligibilities. I'll share the link in the chat. It's on our website. And you can also register for our info session to learn much more on November 1st.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, thank you all for putting your questions in the chat. And Vanessa, thanks so much for sharing all the great work that's happening in Colorado when it comes to, safe routes to parks. And like Vanessa mentioned, this opportunity here is just for people in Colorado, but if you're interested in doing safe routes to parks work in general, we also have a lot of other resources on our website, and Vanessa is very familiar with parks projects and activities that are happening across the country. And even in some of the examples that Vanessa had mentioned, like some of those are opportunities that, it came from different funding sources, like the great one in Durango with the bike racks. That was a partnership with the Rotary Club. And I think it was like a small pot of funding. I don't know if it was $1,500 or I don't remember what the exact amount was. But, like some of these park interventions and these quick wins can be done with some of these, smaller funding opportunities. Not everything has to be, applying for a large state grant or federal grant. Sometimes a few $100 or $1,000 or $1,500 can go a long way to improving park access. So, whether it's a bike rack installation or, creating signage or maps, just like with Safe Routes to School, there are ways to kind of be nimble and flexible when it comes to parks funding as well. So just wanted to keep that in mind for you all as you're thinking about what your parks programming can look like. And Vanessa also dropped the link to the 2024 Safe Routes to Parks Colorado Activating Communities opportunity in the chat. So those of you who are in Colorado and who want to do more work with parks, feel free to take a look at that opportunity as well. And I also wanted to mention a few other, Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Parks collaborations. And some of these might be familiar with you. You might have seen them before or done them yourselves. Traffic gardens are also spaces, are also, being installed in parks. There are a few in Alexandria, Virginia that are really great that are, like within park spaces. I'm sure there are plenty of others across the country. Those of you who aren't familiar with traffic gardens, they're basically bike skills course that's painted on the ground on asphalt, so it kind of mimics what a real road looks like, and students can use them to learn and practice bike safety skills. It's a great bike education tool, and sometimes it can be hard to get those installed on school grounds, and so parks are another opportunity to bring traffic gardens into a community, and also might be more accessible. Sometimes with traffic gardens and school spaces, there are issues with locking the school gate or not having, people from the community on school grounds, whereas a park might be a bit more open when it comes to people who can actually use and access a traffic garden. So that's one example of bike education in parks. Also having student bike rides or walks. I know some of you mentioned in the chat, taking a walking field trip to a park to practice road safety skills or bike safety skills. In DC, there's the biking to the park program, biking in the park program, where the second grade bike education program, students learn bike skills in PE class, and at the end of their bike course, they get to take a ride to a local park. So those of you who might be doing bike education in your in your schools, working with PE teachers, if there's an opportunity to have students take a walk or ride or roll to a park and test out some of their skills. That's another great opportunity to collaborate with a local park. And also story walks. I don't know if any of you are familiar with story walk projects. Those of you who've been on my webinars know that I love libraries and love safe routes to libraries work, and story walks are becoming extremely popular within the library community and safe routes community. And so story walks are basically when you take the pictures, the pages of, it's usually a children's book, a picture book, and enlarge them and place them usually on like, some sort of like metal stand, and place them along a route, and people can actually like read the story as they're walking. So as they walk, page by page, they can enjoy a story and enjoy a nice walk. So there's a great example of one that was just installed in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, at a local park there. So the librarians chose a story. They printed out the story pages nice and large, installed them on some really nice signs, and created a little story walk as people are, walking or rolling along the trail in their local park. So there's a lot of movement when it comes to story walks. And again, another opportunity to, build in that literacy piece, which I'm sure teachers would love, or connect with librarians. It's just another, really interesting and innovative safe routes to parks and safe routes to school collaboration. So there are links to all of these examples in the slide here. So if you have any other questions or want to dive a bit deeper, feel free to check out these links. And there are also a few policy and planning opportunities. So those of you who work in Safe Routes to School might be familiar with your Safe Routes to School plan. Can you incorporate parks into that plan? Vanessa and I were in Pennsylvania a few months ago, and we were doing a Safe Routes to Parks walk audit, and ended up seeing a school dismissal that was happening at the same time as we were doing the Safe Routes to Parks audit. And we realized there are actually a lot of like safe routes to school challenges and barriers here, along with challenges to accessing the park. So you were like, this is a great opportunity for parks and schools to team up and create some sort of, safe routes to school, safe routes to parks action plan, or go after joint funding to improve, access to parks and schools. So that's one other, planning opportunity. Same thing with Vision Zero. Are you incorporating schools and parks into your Vision Zero action plans? What does that look like? So something else to think about when it comes to Vision Zero initiatives, and also complete streets policies. I know Vanessa's done a lot of work with complete streets, and knows a bit about about how parks are being incorporated into that, and our other parks team members do as well. So how are we kind of showing that schools and parks are an important part of complete streets? And same thing with health and wellness policies, especially in schools that have wellness policies. Can you incorporate park access or shared use agreement into a school health and wellness policies, making sure that students have opportunities to, be physically active and be outdoors, incorporating a park opportunity into a health and wellness policy can be a great way, to ensure that students are getting their physical activity throughout the school day. Just a few other ideas and a few other resources for you all to dig into. And again, if you need any, we have lots of parks resources. So if what you're looking for is not covered in this, I'm sure that Vanessa can point you to some other resources that'll be applicable to your community. We do have this aligning safe routes to parks with safe routes to school guide, which is a lot of the examples that we talked about today, along with some other practical strategies for what these collaborations look like. And also a toolkit called Connecting People to Parks. And this is just another resource to help you think about ways to increase safe and equitable access to local parks and green spaces. So again, these are linked here in the presentation and are also available on our website. So if you want to dig into those, feel free to do so. There's a lot of really great information on there. And just a few other upcoming opportunities to possibly partner with parks. We know that in a few months, because that's in a month, less than a month, we Walk and Roll to School Day on Wednesday, October 4th, I believe is the date. A lot of you mentioned having parks be, like that space to meet up for Walk and Roll to School Day. So consider that being a possible collaboration for that celebration day. And also Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day is on Tuesday, November 14th. So again, great opportunity to meet up in a park. Sometimes parks are, close to libraries. So, you can go and check out some books about Ruby Bridges at the library, and then meet up for your Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day and then at the park, and then walk to school. So nice collaboration between, park spaces and school spaces. So think about that as you're kind of getting those plans together over the next few weeks. And I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions in the chat box or Q&A. And Vanessa, I don't know if you answered these. There are people asking, I know somebody was asking about Safe Routes to Parks programs in North Carolina. Or I guess if people are interested in figuring out if there's a Safe Routes to Parks program in their community, what should they do, or who should they reach out to?
Sure. So yeah, I think I try to answer most of them in the chat, but the short answer was I don't know of a state level program in North Carolina. But I did share information about our Safe Routes to Parks Accelerator program, because that's what we're actively sort of working towards, is more states either adopting a Safe Routes to Parks program at the state level, or at least elements of a Safe Routes to Parks program. So sometimes, most often what this looks like is collaboration with state departments, right? The transportation department, the parks department, maybe public health, to work on, supporting local communities on increasing park access. So that was one question. The other question, and I shared the link to the accelerator program because that's also open. So if you work for the state of North Carolina or have connections and are like, oh, we should be doing that here, we actually have applications open for the state program as well as the local level program for Colorado. And then there's another question in the Q&A. To be clear, the opportunity is for a learning cohort as tech assistance for financial award opportunity that will come later to everyone. So just to clarify, the opportunity through activating communities is for Colorado-based nonprofit organizations, and they are required to work closely with local government agency in their community when they apply. But we are only selecting 4 communities in Colorado, and each of those 4 communities does receive $10,000, a small grant to complete an early action, and then participate in this 9-month technical assistance program where we provide hands-on coaching and assistance on specific strategies for you to integrate Safe Routes to Parks in your community. And this can look a few different ways. We're specifically looking for communities wanting to integrate Safe Routes to Parks into their Safe Routes to School program. But you can also read more about that in our program description.
And we have one more question about that opportunity too, Vanessa, from Nick. Would the accelerator program help to start a Safe Routes to Parks program, or is intended to support projects that are more advanced? So where should you be as far as?
Oh, for the state program. So yeah, so on the website, we do have some specific sort of strategies that we're looking to work with state agencies. So they are required to have identified what they want to work on specifically. So that could be like, our state wants to work together across agencies to provide funding to local communities to fund park access improvements, right? That's like one example of like a process or a process change or a practice they want to adopt. So it's a very narrow scope, because similar to the Activating Communities program, we only have like 9 months to work with states. So they have to have like some idea of like what they want to work on together and really be focused on like what element of Safe Routes to Parks they want to do.
And we have another question in the chat about recommended design guidelines for multimodal connections and access. I don't know if we have like a Safe Routes to Parks design guide or engineering guide. We do have one for Safe Routes to School. It's a Safe Route engineering strategies for Safe Routes to School. I'm sure that many of those could be, applied for parks projects. I'm also sure that, like your local, planners and engineers will probably have a sense of like some of the design guidelines when it comes to multimodal connections, or people here, on the session might too. So if anybody has that in the chat, feel free to reach out, but I don't think we have any that are specifically for parks, do we, Vanessa?
No, I think one thing I'll add is the one that we currently share is the one that we share for Safe Routes to School, the engineering solutions, but one of the focus areas for both the state level program and the local level program is working with communities to support design elements around like traffic calming around parks specifically, and sort of like this idea of like a park zone or creating a space similar to a school zone, right? So that's something that like piques your interest. Definitely check out the links that we shared to our Activating Communities program, or if you are interested in kind of supporting that at the state level, that's something that we're looking to work with states on.
Awesome, thanks. And I know there was one other question I know that you answered in the webinar, in the Q&A, but I want to make sure everybody hears it, about examples of Safe Routes to Parks programs in rural communities where parks are kind of spread out or spaces are spread out. If you have any examples of what that could look like or examples to share in the chat.
Yeah, and I think, and I think I answered that one too, but I think specific examples we don't have on our website. I was looking to see, but I know like we're working right now with like Pennsylvania communities, and one of the sort of solutions that they've been working towards is also like this idea of shared use. So we shared earlier about using school sites as also recreation areas, since those might actually be more accessible for like local park use. But then there's also the public transportation element of working to make sure public transportation is accessible if parks are farther out from community members.
Awesome, thanks. And I see Matt in the chat wrote that rural parks are great places to gather people and get people moving, since there's not necessarily like the infrastructure or sidewalks in some places. And Matt's from Iowa, so he knows what rural activities and rural programs look like. So, you know, there are definitely ways to incorporate these concepts of safe routes to parks, you know, in rural communities, whether it's improving infrastructure or just, you know, spaces you can activate to get people, you know, moving and connecting. But I don't remember who asked that question. If you have any other questions, you need more examples, feel free to let us know and we can dig in a bit more. And I'll look through the chat as well to see if there are any other rural examples of safe routes to parks or getting people moving in parks. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up for today. Thank you all so much for joining us, for sharing your experiences and ideas and resources in the chat box. Again, we will be sharing out the webinar recording, the presentation slides. People asked about getting information from the chat box. I'll make sure that that gets to you as well, and any of the other resources that you shared. We'll also have our next Colorado Safe Routes School webinar on Wednesday, October 11th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. We're going to be talking about community engagement highlights. We actually did a pilot program last year where people, communities in Boulder County and Pueblo County took a look at our Colorado Community Engagement Toolkit and actually tested out the framework and put it into action. So we'll talk a bit about how they were able to do that. Boulder County did a really great partnership resource mapping project to help improve and enhance their bike education events. And then Pueblo did some neighborhood interviews as a part of their work in public health initiatives. So really excited to share those as well. And then lastly, I just want to give you all a reminder that early bird registration for our Safe Routes to School Summit ends on Friday. If you haven't registered, please make sure that you go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you there. Just a sneak peek at what we'll be talking about in some of our sessions. We'll be talking about Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, which I talked about a bit earlier. Equity and safe routes to school. What does that look like beyond just saying this is one of the 6 E's, but what does equity really look like in action? Safe routes to school funding opportunities, how to find funding opportunities that work best for you and your programs. More about traffic gardens and bike education. So if you're a traffic garden enthusiast or intrigued by traffic gardens, that'll be a great session. E-bike education and messaging. We get lots of questions about e-bikes these days. So we'll have the League of American Bicyclists on to talk about the latest in e-bike curriculum and messaging. Collaborations between Safe Routes to School and the CORE network, so like AmeriCorps fellows or other service fellows, how they can help support Safe Routes projects. Youth engagement, especially high school students and older youth, what does that look like in Safe Routes to School? And then also some great examples of rural programming and urban programming. So what do Safe Routes programs look like in our small towns and our big cities? We're going to bridge the rural and urban divide and dive into that a bit during our summit as well. So thank you all so much for coming today. Here's my contact information, Vanessa's information. Feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions. Keep an eye out for the recording, the presentation slides, and a survey from me. And I hope you all have a rest of your day. And hopefully we will see you at our next Colorado webinar in October and at our summit on October 24th through the 26th. So thank you all so much. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon. And thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here as well and lending your Safe Routes to Parks expertise and experience. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Corey.
Have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.